I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Winthrop Town Council, September 5th, 2023, 7 p.m. We're in the Harvey Hearing Room. Roll call, please.
Counsel Honan.
Here.
Counsel Fusillo.
Here.
Counsel Munson.
Here.
Counsel Belcher.
Here.
Counsel DeMarco.
Here.
Counsel Flockhart.
Here.
Counsel Aiello. Vice President Ruggiero.
Here.
President Lettieri.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please stand for the pledge. Led by Council Belcher.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Minutes have been circulated from the August 15th meeting. Everyone has had a chance to take a look at them. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Councilor DeMarco, second by Councilor Belcher. Any discussions, omissions, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No? Ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Under general information and recommendations, first we have Jim Powers from Powers and Sullivan. They are our auditors, and they are here to discuss their final report from fiscal '22. Jim, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me first. Is this on or is?
It is, it's just going to the TV. Yep.
All right, thank you. I'm here tonight to discuss the summary of the audit for fiscal year '22. The audit's been done for a long time. It's just getting before, it sometimes takes some time. Last year went actually very well from the standpoint of we were getting used to auditing during COVID and getting through that. It did cause some disruptions and delays as we went through everything, but it did for pretty much every city and town as we went through. But we got everything that we needed. Some of the good things that happened, and thanks to Manager Marino and the staff all the way down, unbelievable cooperation from all your staff, from the town side, from the school, et cetera, as we're looking for information. Everything we tested came out okay. We did not have any audit adjustments relative to fixing the books and records. So one of the good things that you can take a look at and what you want to have happen during the year when you get interim information throughout the year, you should be able to rely on that being an accurate presentation of your financial condition for that fiscal year for where you are. Because things, especially during the pandemic, there were crazy things that happened from a financial standpoint, and you need, in order to manage what's going on, you need to be able to measure that. And so knowing that comfort, we don't just audit at the end of the year, we take a look at the system of internal controls to make sure that things are being reconciled on a timely basis, which they are. Most important being cash and receivables. The payroll information is processed right away. The warrants are processed. There's nothing behind on that. You have to maintain your records in accordance with the uniform Massachusetts accounting systems, which you do. We did not have any findings relative to that. So all in all, a very good audit. But realistically, the most important thing is those controls over your accounting records to make sure that you can rely on that not only at year end but throughout the year. There are 3 reports that we go through. The federal government, the first one that I'll talk about, it looks like you have copies of the report. This one, I don't have the pretty one, I just get that. Take one. Town of Winthrop report on federal awards program. If a community spends over $750,000 in any one fiscal year throughout the nation from federal funds, whether you get it directly from the federal government or is it passed through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which a good portion of the money is for a local community like yours, you have to have this, what's called a federal single audit, where in effect, the federal government puts out what's called a compliance supplement, which is really just this big giant audit program that says if you have this particular grant and you're receiving these particular feds or this federal funds out of these programs, these are the audit steps we need you as an independent auditor to do on our behalf. So they lay out all of the compliance steps and they identify the key elements of what they call directive material to make sure that we not only do those steps, but we also expand on that depending on what we find to make sure that you have that. And part of the Single Audit Act says if you don't have to audit everything. For example, in 2022, the town spent a little over $6 million worth of federal funds. We go through a process which is again identified in that compliance supplement. We identify and do a risk assessment of all of those particular grants. One of the big parts of the risk that you take a look at is the dollars you spend. Say, for example, in 2022, you spent a little over $3 million in COVID-related funds, all those grant funds you got in, out of $6 million. Guess what? That's a major program, okay? Just because of the size and the nature of that hadn't been audited before the first time through. So we spent special attention on that, and it was very important because it was new not only to the federal government, but it was also new to the cities and towns. So making sure you were in compliance with that was very important. In addition to that, they had an education stabilization fund, ESSA, if you've heard of that, it's part of that, which again was COVID related, new grant as it went through, spent significant time making sure that was done correctly. And at the same time, the school lunch program, if you remember in 22, the federal government decided to pay all school lunches. So there was, everybody was eligible. So it actually reduced a lot of the auditing requirements because usually in that particular grant, we have to take a look at eligibility. Is that particular student eligible for a free or reduced lunch? Didn't have to do that for that year. So that one actually became easy than the other two, which were a little bit more difficult. But the bottom line, we audited about about 80% of the funds that came in. We only had to, depending on how things shake out as you go through, a minimum of 20% of that total. But when we evaluated risk and how you went through it, it ended up being about 80%. No findings, everything was really in great shape over at school. COVID funds as you spent them, properly authorized as you went through, expenditures, all the documentation was there. Great job internally about it, no findings, no question cost. This coming year, upcoming year, 2023, you'll be looking at probably additional ESSA funds that continued in there. COVID went down, but the American Rescue Plan Act went up. I've been talking to Robbie a little bit about that as we've gone through. And so we'd expect that both in fiscal year 23 and 24 to be a major focus of the single audit. One of the good things that you have, because you're a smaller community, when you receive under $10 million, up to $10 million, the federal government actually did something very intelligent and said, we don't need to micromanage what you spend. Everybody needs these particular funds to get back on their feet. And they really reduced the requirement. They called it revenue replacement. I don't know if everybody's heard of that. So pretty much anything that is a governmental service is allowable. There's a few things that aren't. So you'd really have to work hard not to find something that was allowable as part of that. There's still compliance requirements that you have to maintain, but the reporting's easier, and it's also a lot easier on the U.S. Treasury and how they have to monitor it at the federal grant. So they're looking at the bigger dollars as opposed to small communities. So I'd expect next year's federal grant to kind of go in the same way, because the school year to year, there's a lot of the recurring grants that you get. They're good at that. They've been doing them for years. Kids have been getting free lunch, lunch for a long time. I expect they probably still got some last year and some this year. And so that same process is in place. So that report is excellent result on that. And through the chair, do you want, I take questions as we go through? I think it's probably easier for you.
Yes, I think that's right. Yep. Are there any questions for Council Flockhart?
We're currently hearing from Washington that they've decided now maybe they didn't spend all those funds properly, and they're going back in and looking at that
Yeah,
COVID money.
yeah.
Do you anticipate that we'll have any impact from that?
Not from what we looked at as we went through. I was talking to a potential new client today that called me up, and he told me on the COVID funds and a couple of things, they did not go through, he didn't expect he was a new CFO at that particular community. Said, I expect we might have some problems because we did not go through the proper procurement processes. Things that we checked here, you did. Okay, everything that you done was according to what you were required to do. So I would not expect that. I would expect to hear stories of it, but the state has been looking into a lot of that. So the state, the COVID funds passed through the Commonwealth, and they have for several years now been in effect doing audits of local communities, et cetera, taking a look at all the reporting had to go through them and pass through their particular own people in there, the financial people. And if you haven't heard something by now, we didn't come up with anything. And if they do come up with something, one of the things that is still part of our role is to discuss with management what the issues and determine whether or not there's any validity to it. I'd be surprised if there was, but I can't say 100%, okay?
Any other questions on the council?
Okay,
Continue.
that's an easy one. Actually, the next one's a pretty easy one too, which is just the management letter as we go through. And this document over the years has gotten thinner, which is good. This is not a document that tells you all the good things you do. That's what you're hearing tonight. It's not here to praise you. It's saying this is the things you probably need some improvement on. And one of the things that we look at, we do when we do the audit, conduct the audit, we're required by our own standards to do a risk assessment of the town. Take a look at your operations. You know, take a look, as I talked about earlier, your internal controls, your payroll process, your vendor process, your receipt process, all the things that are important, your procurement process as you go through, how things are approved, what are the internal controls are. You know, when you have a warrant, does that go through all of the necessary steps in approval? Not only are you in compliance with Massachusetts laws and regulations, in compliance with federal laws and regulations, but the proper people, as you're signing that warrant before it goes out the door, they have the proper approvals. So we take a look at that, and if we have any deficiencies in that system, we would note them here. And they would normally be called if they were either significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. And I don't know, the easiest way I've always found to describe this is I'm an old Catholic guy from Charlestown, so it's the difference between, you know, a Mortensen and a Danielson. You don't want either one of them. You're still going to have to do some penance, but you don't want the Mortensen, which is the material weakness in internal controls, which in effect, your internal controls are putting the town's asset at risk. Or you don't have those controls procedures in place to protect them, and people just doing the normal process of doing that. And then the other things become minor things. And then the last couple of pieces here for the 2 points that we have left this year, they're more of efficiency points. You should look at a better way to do this. One of them being the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which requires how you put together your audited financial statements, requires long-term assets and liabilities to be measured and recorded. So your long-term assets and liabilities include things like compensated absences. So at June 30th, a lot of employees have earned paid time off, vacation time, sick time, etc. You need to quantify that and put a dollar amount next to that and book that liability if it's significant, which it is at times. There's a number of employees, and things don't just stop at June 30th as you go through. This process is manual, okay? We would prefer to see it electronic, especially with the payroll systems that are out there, not only just to quantify and make ease and more accurate the liability that needs to be recorded, but even the information to protect the fact that if somebody had 40 hours of vacation time carried over, it properly, you'd like to see that on your payroll check, those type of things as you go through. Towns looking into it as they go forward. It's not material, it's not significant, but it's just an efficiency point that I think is a good thing to take a look at, considering the town is doing so well in all the other areas. And it's just finding time to do that as you go through. That the town can see what happens. The second piece is like 75% done, disaster recovery plan. Things are more and more important as you go through. You always hear stories about a different city or town or whatever being, attacked, and all of a sudden everything's frozen, you can't do anything, and you get ransomware, those type of things. You want to make sure that you've done that. This town went through and got a process in place, had a vendor, has a system in place, but it really just hasn't been formally documented. We were just, like, because it's so important, it's there. We looked at it, we reviewed it, everything looks good, but we just like to see that being formally accepted, approved, and you just have that system in place. Town has policies and procedures on a lot of other things as they go through. I just think it's a good thing to maybe take a look at. So those two things, considering everything you do, especially with school, police, fire, and everything else, I think this is an excellent report, and your management should be commended on how well they're doing in maintaining that. Any questions on these couple of points, or any other ones relative to controls?
Vice President Ruggiero.
Yeah, thank you. Just in regards to this report in particular, what was your time frame? What was your scope? What did you look at? How long did it take you to compile this? And did you interview department heads? How did you have access to department heads?
We
You
have
just spoke with
access to
Tony. How
everyone
did
that we
you?
go through.
Okay.
So what we're hired for, realistically, we're hired to audit your financial statements. And so we don't necessarily go to the Council on Aging, say for an example,
Sure.
because they're insignificant. All their bills are paid through, the accounting offices, the receipts are coming in through Treasury. So we're focusing on the school as you go through, Treasurer Collector's office, obviously the CFO's office as they go through, because everything gets processed through there, and the assessors, because the assessor has a lot to do with obviously setting the tax rate, going through that. We take a look at the recap, make sure it's compiled correctly, make sure that we test abatements and exemptions that are awarded as a rate. So we're looking at the financial elements. If we're told, and if you took a look at your financial statements, which we'll look at in a minute, if you looked at your real estate revenue, your state aid, and $2.5 million worth of motor vehicle excise tax, that's 98% of your general fund revenue. You're a simple community, you're small.
Yep.
You don't have as many, you have some big things here, but your focus is on those particular elements as you go through. So where's our focus? On the big things.
Sure.
As we go through. We take a look. And if you break down your budget, one of the things we've talked about is taking a risk assessment. Good portion, now, you do a pretty robust budget process, I think, goes through, looking at employees, costs associated with that, all the departments are putting in there, and when you break down that budget, and you take a look at it, so say if you took a look at, the police department budget, you're gonna see, everything's good. If you take all the offices going through, all of a sudden you'll get at least 80% of your expenses just in a structure that you know who the officers are, what are their grade, payroll, etc. There's a process in place. All of a sudden you get most of the there. And then you take a look at other expenses that they have. Obviously they need expenses to run for the utilities, could be a lot of other things. But before you know it, when you take a look at really discretionary funds in most departments, a lot of times it's 15, 20, 30, 50, or say a police department, a couple $100,000 of discretionary funds, which is they need to have. But it's tiny when you apply that to the big amount.
Right.
And so the control's over there, so there's not a lot of places, because you have such good controls, and you said, if we go over, from an audit standpoint, we kill the budget.
Right.
Meaning that we're all over that for all the votes, we get everything in the clerk, make sure it's all certified, we tie those back into the accounting ledgers to make sure that the accounting ledgers represents what you actually voted for, payroll for the police, fire, all the different departments as you go through. And so there's not a lot of places, and a lot of places that have that, so we focus on, as I said up front, the risk elements as we go through. But we don't have to necessarily visit the police department, because we're gonna take a look at any approved payroll that they have, because the payroll process is in there, it comes from the department saying, oh yes, these officers work, these officers had details this week, and it went to these particular funds.
Okay.
So when we do our testing, we'll select different payrolls from different departments at different times during the year. We'll do the same at the school for the teachers, everybody else, what happens in the summer. And then we do the same thing for expenditures. We do the same thing for revenues. And we also do the same thing for journal entries. I don't know if anybody's an accountant, but sometimes when you make a mistake, you gotta fix it, you know? And so how do you fix it? Well, if you already processed that payroll, and if you charge the firefighter's salary to the police officer's budget line item, you need to fix it. You can't go back and say, give me your check back, I'm gonna rewrite you this check. Firefighter cashed his check and went to the wrong place. What you do is you make a journal entry where the accounting staff, along with departmental staff, will say, yes, that should have been charged here. You have supporting documentation that's assigned and attached to that journal entry, and you make, in effect, you move the expense from one line item to another. We want to make sure that's a place where fraud can occur, that you can hide things as you go through. Unfortunately, we've found that in several places over the years. I can tell you stories that you scratch your head at, say they even tried to do that, and yeah, people try to do things. And, but we just, now, do we go take a look at the $3.38 journal entry? No. Okay. Do we look at the $338,000 one? Yes, as we go through. So we test all of the key elements that are in the accounting ledgers, but realistically, the departments are focusing on is really the accounting CFO area, because everything comes there.
Right.
Okay? Every receipt has to be also reported there. Every disbursement has to be reported there. Every journal entry has to be reported there. Everything that happens at the police, every purchase order has to be reported there. So that's what the central repository is, and that's where you get the ledgers that produce the financial statements.
Got it.
That produces what you file with the Department of Revenue for your free cash certification, for all of the reports the Department of Revenue requires. That's all coming out of that one office. However, we'll take what comes in and go back to that department as we go through. If the manager asked us, Jim, could you go check the cash receipts that I'm not picking on the Council on Aging, but we're having problems, I think they're having problems getting deposits in on time. We'll talk to Tony and just say, yeah, that's not a problem. We'll send a team out there, do a site visit. It's not important for the audit, because it's not significant. But we'll go take a look at it. Sometimes that requires that, or sometimes we will check an expenditure or a revenue as part of a general testing.
Yep.
And we see something that just in that particular department didn't look right. And what we then do is extend our audit procedures to include some additional testing, maybe at that particular department level or several months as we go across.
Okay.
Does that kind of,
No, that's exactly
Yeah,
what I was
yeah.
looking for, just your methodology, your
Yeah,
testing,
it's-
things like that. I don't know if that's in any of this, but,
you're not gonna read it there?
okay.
If you wanna come take a look at my work paper.
No, I'm just,
Really exciting stuff in
yeah,
the accounting world is-
just give us some background,
Okay.
that's all I was looking for, so thank you.
But
It is nice.
that gives you
Yeah.
a good background of how this thing is produced.
Exactly.
which
Yeah,
is the
that's-
audited
yeah.
financial statements.
And it is nice to see that in the many years Powers and Sullivan have been our auditors, to see these areas of focus and to see 2 areas right here, which we're working on.
Yeah.
But in the years past, I've seen 12, I've seen 14, I've seen 16 areas of focus. And,
Significant
you know, and I
efficiency,
think a
yeah.
lot of credit has to go to our management team and our hiring practices. But, you know, we'd like to see 0 areas of focus,
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
But
but-
I mean, you know, very happy to see this, and thank you for that, but you may continue.
From a technical standpoint, those 2 areas, because they're not a significant deficiency and they're not a material weakness, we don't even have to write them. So it would still be okay. So I can make you happy by not writing it, it's not required.
No, we always want to be
Okay?
better.
However, we're just trying to look at the efficiencies of that and that open, frank discussion with, you know, the financial team to say, do you think you can do this a little better? Sometimes I ask us, we want to take a look at this, we'd like to see if we could do this better, more efficiently, so we don't have to duplicate effort, and that's part of our job as we go through.
And I know we've been focused a lot on compensated absences, and I think we've done a really good job over the past 12 months and really,
Yeah. It's kind of manual, but it was, we still found it to be accurate.
yep.
So we didn't find a problem with it, we just find that there's better ways to do these particular things. The next report, which is the report on examination of the financial statements. I know you don't want me going over this page by page. You can if you want me to, but I know you don't. So what I'm going to do, I've kind of explained how all this thing got compiled, and the explanation, as Stephen has had that question, that kind of says what happened and how we audit what's in here. And up front about your system of internal controls. These are your financial statements. These are not ours. We help you put these together. We own what's called the audit opinion. And so we're letting the reader know that we're giving an opinion on whether or not these financial statements present fairly the financial position and results of operation of the town of Winthrop for the year ended 6/30/22 in accordance with generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And so what happens here, you have to, I mentioned it earlier, the town has to maintain its books and records in accordance with the state's Department of Revenue set guidance, the Uniform Municipal Accounting system as you go through. So every city and town has the same books and records. They treat grants the same way. They treat the general fund the same way. They treat the stabilization funds the same way. So they can measure that on a budgetary basis of accounting. And realistically, communities live and breathe on a cash basis of accounting. So you can't spend money you don't have and you don't have in your pocket, in effect, which is a good way to do it, to make sure you don't overspend. Each year, as you go through your deliberative process of your budget, you know you have to have a budgeted balance, a balanced budget, sorry. And you go through that to make sure, and you have to remain under 2.5, you have to go through all that. We audit the heck out of that, I've already said, to make sure that there's an accurate presentation of how it goes through. But that, unlike a business, that budget is a legal part, just as well as the actual expenditure of funds of your ledgers. So when you spend something, obviously, there's a legal thing that happened, that you spent money, you sent it to a third party, you went through the procurement, but the budget that allowed that expenditures coming from the boards and town, et cetera, is really important as you go through. That's how you develop free cash and how you go through this and where you stand. That's the most important thing that happens. Then after that, in order to be in compliance and have the same financial statements under the same measurement focus, not just for Massachusetts, but every state has a different, accounting system. So what you have to do is you have to convert each state's accounting system into one standard one that everybody can then measure you against, whether it's the city of Boston, city of Lynn, Winthrop, Somerville, etc., or any other community throughout the nation. So there's one standard set of rules set by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which in effect has 100+ standards that we have to help and make sure that the town abides by. We talked about the compensated absences earlier. Well, that's a requirement of the GASB. It's not a requirement of the state, because that's a future expense. You gotta make sure you have it when you go to pay it, but it's a future expense. Things that everybody's aware of, and of the pension liability, okay? And in your case, it is a pleasure to say, I don't know if anybody takes a look at it, but you're one of the few communities in the state that is overfunded in their pension, okay? You're 114% funded. Not even close to anybody else as we go through. I smile when I look at this, but I really do. That took a lot of effort for a lot of time, wise investing by the retirement system. They need to be commended as part of that. And the other thing that matters on that, just since I'm on that, people might not realize how big a deal that is, but most of the, like the county systems, about 50% funded, okay? So you have, you know, $100+ million worth of assets and a $97 million liability. Now, things go up and down because of investment rates of return and things. There's a thing called out there called the discount rate, which is how you discount your future payments back to account value to see what do I have to have in the bank today to pay for all these future liabilities. The actuary goes through a deliberative process as they go through there. Most communities use 7.25%. The higher the discount rate, okay, the lower the funding percentage, meaning that I'm using the 7.5% discount rate, and so therefore I have I'm 60% funded. But if you use an 8.5% discount rate as opposed to a 7, which is thinking that, I'm going to make 8.5% each year on my investments, all of a sudden, what they say, 100 million or whatever it is, all of a sudden, your liability goes down by like 25%. Because you're using an overinflated amount. So what you use is you're using a rate in the last couple of years of 6.75%, which is amongst the lowest in the Commonwealth, in the nation. You're under 7%. So you're showing the worst case possibility, almost, but you're also showing the best results. And that makes a big difference. Conversely, the other unfunded liability that you had, these two that are long-term, the other post-employment benefit liability, okay, which is you're legally required to pay for at least 50% of any employees, any retirees' health insurance for life as you go through that. There was never any legal requirement, unlike the pension system, for the city or town to fund that. And so a lot of places didn't. I don't know, 5-6 years ago, you put in like 50,000 one year, 100,000 another, 150, and for the last several years, you stopped putting anything in. You've got $350,000 worth of assets in that fund, of which you put in probably $325 in cash, and then another $20,000 of investment income. But you've got a $100 million liability. So you really haven't done much. But what you have the ability to do is come forward the next, and again, this is a decision you have to make. You don't have to fund it. It's just an accounting number that's there to tell the reader that you have this unfunded liability, is whether or not, since you're fully funded on the pension side, which is the legal side, which you had until 2040 to do. And again, I'm your auditor, I'm just telling you what's there. I am not recommending that you do anything, that's not my role. Can't act as management as you go through. But you're in a unique position that as you move forward, because you're fully funded, your assessment from the retirement system has the opportunity to go down because all you have to do is maintain. There's a thing called the normal cost. What are the people next year earning on the retirement benefits for another year of service? So when they retire 20 years from now, you'll have how much money in there. actuary will go through that. And so all of a sudden, you may have, like, go from $3.5 million, which you fund every year, you could get down to $2.5 million. Then you make a decision whether you want to spend it on something else, give it back to the taxpayers, or maybe say, you know what, we have the same type of liability, and maybe talk to the actuary with what-if scenarios, whether it makes sense to take someone, none of those, and put that against that. Those funds we've seen in the last several years, a lot of communities stopped doing it because of COVID and all the uncertainty. Remember a lot of revenues, stopped coming in, and everybody had that, so we're not gonna budget that. But you're still in pretty good shape. It's only $100 million, which is small considering the place your size. But since you're fully funded on the other one, your long-term assets are like, you look great from that standpoint, and I just can't say enough of that. That's one of the major things that I see inside of these financial statements as we go through. Your general fund balance is a little over $3 million, which is sufficient for what you do. You manage that, you pretty much broke even for the year. Your budget, the amounts that you budget for your estimated receipts are pretty accurate. There's not any crazy fluctuations. Same thing for your expenditures as you go through that. You have, $3.5 million worth of a couple of different stabilization funds. So you have that in effect in reserve in case something happens. So it looks like, you also say we've managed this pretty well to make sure that you're in pretty good shape. So there's nothing in there that I can criticize from the standpoint of like, you haven't paid attention to this. Take a look at the 10-year trends. You have grant funds. Grant funds pay for themselves. They just revolve. The state, all the federal grants we were talking about, everything. They just, money comes in, money goes out. Some of them will especially, from the school lunch that revolves around, et cetera. You get some small revolving funds. Nothing that's of particular note. And you have a bunch of enterprise funds, and they're all pretty much paying for themselves, enterprise business type. You have a lot of small ones in there. And again, it's in pretty good shape. Your debt is at a reasonable level considering where you are, how much building you've done in the past, through schools, everything else that you've gone through. Sorry, I can't really criticize you as much as you might want me to as an auditor, but it's really, an impressive piece. Again, I just highlighted the important things that are in there. I did not go over each individual. If anybody had any questions on the overall financial condition, what I've said, or a particular element within here, I'd be happy to address anything in there.
We're very proud of our retirement system and our retirement board. They've done a great job, and we've been very conservative in the investing. And the market could fluctuate, and that number could change at any moment. So I think we're going to remain conservative, but we have talked about plans of how to, that delta, that variance that will be there gives us an opportunity to make substantial investments into OPEB and to look at other things. But, I think the plan is to continue to be conservative and to maintain the trend that we've started. But I'll go to Councilor Munson.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. It's comforting to know that we're doing pretty as well as you say we are, coming from a, I'm assuming that your clients are almost all municipalities?
Yeah, everything.
So earlier you said that because we've received over $750,000 a year, we're mandated to get a federal audit every year. So is that who hired you?
No.
No, works for us.
We hired you because we're required to have an audit.
Right.
So how long have you been with auditing Winthrop?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Not you personally, but the company.
It's been over a dozen years.
Yeah.
And that's part of the charter that the council has an internal auditor, which we've hired for 18 years now.
We've got a lot of clients that we've had over 20 years. There's good or bad, et cetera, as you go through this. There's only a limited number of CPA firms that have the expertise in governments because I was at a competitor of mine that does a lot of business, et cetera, was friends with a partner over there. He had a meeting, he just wanted to talk to me on a different matter, and I got introduced to another commercial guy. He said, oh, Jim Powers, Powers and Sullivan, he specializes in municipalities, and he went, ugh, I'm serious, they,
Make you feel good.
they really do. It's like, because it's different. There's 3 different bases of accounting in here. There's different rules. I don't know if you ever heard of the Financial Accounting Standards Board, which has always been around, and they set the rules for commercial entities, SEC things, et cetera. But then they had to set up the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And if the rules were all the same, you wouldn't need a GASB. You just have a FASB. Because what you do, if you're a commercial entity, even a not-for-profit, you get a profit motivation as you go through. You don't have a profit motivation. And so what you do and how you fund things, you could not have an unfunded liability like you have legally if you weren't a government. Because a commercial enterprise could go out of business. And so you can't leave the employee on the hook for a defined benefit plan with even a 6.5% assumed interest rate. You have to use a risk-free rate. And all of a sudden, you couldn't afford that, but you have the luxury of, I know I'm not gonna be around here in 100 years, neither anybody in here, but more than likely Winthrop will be still here, okay? It'll still be viable. You cannot, it's illegal in Massachusetts for you to go bankrupt. And so you have different rules because you can do things that are longer basis. You can use things that are different. So it required different standards, and it's a hard thing to,
I guess where I was leading with that question, and I appreciate your thorough responses, and in your thorough audit, this has been very informative. So being that you've been with us for so long, have you seen a notable change in the last few years? And isn't it true that our accounting standards changed as well, and that made it easier to actually show that we were compliant?
yeah, accounting standards change every year as you go through. You had the Municipal Modernization Act at the state level that made it easier to do some things, say for your abatements and exemptions and the different things that gave you more flexibility, more leeway how to do things and manage your funds on a more logical basis as you go through. The Uniform Municipal Accounting System, they've changed over time. A lot of it, some of it is to kind of get closer to the generally accepted accounting principles, so you're not as different as you go through. Things like how to account for your pensions or self-insured trust funds. But it moves. It doesn't necessarily make it easier. Sometimes it makes it more complicated. But there's a lot of support in the government, the Mass Municipal Accountants Associations and the Treasurers Association, Select Board Associations, et cetera, that are out there to give everybody, not only from the CPA firms, to give support to financial people, but also to their peers, and it makes it easy. The other thing that's happening, and we're kind of proud of it ourselves, is that a lot of our employees, not everybody wants to be an auditor for their entire life like me. I don't know why, but they don't. But they end up being the leaders in the financial communities here. We have so many out there that are now CFOs, chief financial officers, accountants, auditors, treasurers, collectors, and so now we're getting that professional level that wasn't 20 years ago, it wasn't there. It was kind of the old school before the changes happened at the state level to get a little bit more sophisticated. And all my peers in the firms are doing the same. So we're having, you get people like Robbie out there that does a great job as they go through and knows what he's doing. It makes my life easier from an audit standpoint, and it gives you that accurate representation throughout the year that you know what you see as a report you can rely on. I don't know if that gets you where you want it to be.
Kudos to our team. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I got a comment.
Counselor DeMarco.
So I'm nitpicking here.
That's
I think the reports are very, very precise, very accurate, well put together. The only thing that rubbed me the wrong way is, once again, when we've had a report here at Town Hall, is that we've been compared to Lynn and we've been compared
Oh,
to
I didn't
Somerville.
compare that, just a close place.
I know that it's a close place, but I'd rather hear Marblehead, I'd rather hear Swampscott, I'd rather hear Manchester on the Sea, smaller communities that aren't over 80,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, from the standpoint, if you want to get into talking about the pensions,
Yeah.
I'm comparing you to Wellesley. for
Yeah,
example.
okay.
Okay. But there's not a lot of communities out there that I can compare you to in that particular.
No, I said I was
Yeah.
nitpicking. I just wanted communities of the same size and the same demeanor. I see Somerville and Lynn as
Yeah, I
big
mean, I could have
cities.
said Hull, I could have said a lot of other
Yeah.
places, but that's what came to my mind. I didn't mean anything
I know you
by
did,
that.
I know you did.
But,
I said I was nitpicking.
yeah, I'll agree with that.
Any other questions? Well, we can't thank you enough for coming, taking the time. We appreciate your work. You've done a great job for us for a lot of years, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you for allowing me to have the time to hopefully explain it.
Yes,
Like I have.
thank you for coming.
Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.
Kudos to our team.
We're in good shape.
You won the... You good?
Oh, yeah, change of view.
Okay. So next on the agenda, we have presentation on Winthrop Middle School site. So there's no secret that this site has been vacant for quite a long time now, going on 7, almost 8 years. And it's not for a lack of trying. You know, you hear a lot of comments, we haven't done anything. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes. We've come up with a lot of different alternatives. We've discussed them. We've looked at the pluses and minuses. I'll go over them a little bit more in depth a little later on. But it's not for a lack of trying. At the beginning of this year, I started trying to think outside the box a bit, of thinking of a project that would fit the goals that we've set. So I'm going to start this presentation now. This is on the old middle school site. Denise?
I'm going.
Okay, and so this is the site we're talking about. It involves roughly, without the ice arena, it involves roughly 95,000 square feet. You could go on. So the goals for this site that we've talked about over the last 8 years with different councilors, different town managers and such, but one of the goals for this site has been a revenue stream for the town. We've talked since 2008, when the state came in and said, we don't have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem. And, you know, those words have stuck now for 15 years. And we're a limited-sized town. We have limited commercial businesses in the town. We don't have a separate tax rate where we could really kill the businesses like a Peabody or a Burlington or a Saugus, that we could have that separate rate to really add to our revenue base. So we wanted this site to be a revenue stream for the town. And we wanted it to be a stimulus for business. Now, that site was a school for many years, so people say, well, that didn't, but that was potentially, 600 people in and out of the center and the areas around Metcalf Square and such. So we wanted some sort of stimulus for businesses to keep businesses attractive in this town. We wanted a net income. So we talked about revenue stream, and we talk about net income. There's, people can say, oh, we're going to build whatever, apartment complex, and we're going to get $100,000 in revenue, but we want to look at that net revenue. After the impact to different town departments, such as the schools or public safety or such, if you're getting in 100,000 but you're spending 80, you're really only netting out 20,000. So we're trying to think again outside the box for a net income stream. And leading to the next point, with less stress on town departments, right? So we want to try to maintain our department levels. We have increasing school population always, so we want to try to keep the stress to other town departments down. in longevity. We wanted to look at a project that we can see there for an extended future, right? For long-term, long into Winthrop's future. As Jim Powers said, we might not be here in 100 years, but the town will be, and we want to make sure we're building investments into the town that are going to be sticking around. So past projects, ideas that we've talked about, that have been talked about, there's been housing units. I've heard multiple projects with 100 to 150 either condominium units or apartment units, L-shaped from Walden around Pauline, up at the top. So there's been multiple project ideas on that. And when you talk about housing and stuff like that, now you're talking about the net revenue and the impact to the town and the impact to traffic and congestion and parking and such. But there are some pluses with that too, because you are providing some sort of stimulus for businesses. So it might check a couple of the boxes, but it's not predominantly checking the boxes in its totality. We've talked to community colleges and local universities to maybe have them have an annex here. And we thought that would be a really good idea. It would generate, you're not necessarily adding residents to the town, so you're not really having an impact on the schools, but you're having a business stimulus, and you're getting some tax revenue in. And that was something that we looked for multiple years on, and it wasn't necessarily our desire not to have it. It was the lack of interest from the university and community colleges that we talked to. They were just in a position where they were kind of downsizing a little bit and not looking to expand. Public safety building, which has been talked a lot about, especially in the recent times. One of the positives with the public safety building was it was a site that we owned and we could develop on. The negatives, going back to the goals, it was not a stimulus for the town in any way, because it was going to cost the taxpayers money. It wasn't going to be any sort of net income for the town, and it was not a business stimulus. And then it was just a size issue. Even, we're talking about a potential public building complex that would be 50,000 square feet. This is over 95,000 square feet. And, the other part of this project, in my mindset, has always been to keep it some sort of recreational use. And, I think that's what a lot of people in this town feel, that the majority of that property has been for well over 100 years, probably, up almost 100 years now. And, so we were looking at that also. Incubator space. We looked at different types of businesses, mostly tech businesses, which will be coming up next, but that might want to come in and share the space. Maybe that's something that we could use the existing building for, retrofit it and have a number of small tech companies or different type companies that want to use it as an incubate type space. We really didn't get a lot of traction on that at all and didn't have a lot of interested parties. Hotel, that was, honestly, I'll be lying if I didn't say it, that was one of my ideas from the beginning. I thought it checked a lot of boxes. Still do in a lot of ways. It checked boxes where it's going to bring a stimulus to the town. It's going to bring income to the town. It's not going to affect our town resources as much. It's not going to have an impact on the schools. We're close to Logan. There's so many other hotels. But that never really got off the ground. We did talk to several hotel chains. They weren't necessarily interested in the site. So we dropped that as a potential idea. Green space, that's the easy thing, right? You just rip the building down, and it costs us $1.5 million to rip it down, plant some grass, and we just have expanded green space. It's nice for the community. It doesn't put any stress on any departments. It doesn't affect the schools. It's good for the environment. There's a lot of good things. It doesn't provide any revenue stream for the town, and it doesn't provide any stimulus. But it was something that was thought and considered. And then the last, which I can't see right now, but I think it was tech companies, which we talked about more in the incubate space. Challenges our community faces. Limited revenue, we already discussed that. We do have a limited revenue stream. We try to, we've been told for many years by residents alike to maybe try to think outside the box a little bit. I've heard it many times at public comments. You don't want to just keep it being a burden to the taxpayers. It's because of the taxpayers we have I think we have a beautiful, quaint seaside community. We want to keep that, but we also have to look towards the future and look towards what we're leaving for our kids and grandkids too. So we do have a limited revenue stream. Increasing school population, we're approaching just about 2,000 kids this year. We've been incredibly fortunate to the taxpayers for funding it, but we've built 3 beautiful new schools over the past 22 years. We are fortunate that the Fort Bank School has been paid off. The Cummings School will be paid off in a couple of years, and obviously we still have multiple years left on the new middle high school. But we do have an increasing school population. The MSBA is an incredible program, and they offered us the opportunity to build these beautiful schools by giving us basically 50 cents on the dollar. So we spent, on those 3 schools totality, we spent about $105 or $106 million, and about $53 million of that came from the MSBA. So we thank them for that. The negative with the MSBA is they tell you what you're going to build. So even though we might think that beautiful brand-new schools will bring more people to the town and more people to schools, they don't look at it like that. They look at your past demographics and such, and they say, okay, this is what we're going to build the schools for. So we have beautiful new schools, but they're somewhat, taxed already. They're approaching that saturation point. So we want to be increasingly aware of that, of our increasing school population. Our density, it's not a big secret. We're 1.6 square miles. We have 19,000+ people in the town. We're a very dense community, one of the densest in the Commonwealth. So, we want to be aware of that, right? How many you're going to have, and I've always been a big proponent of incremental development. You're going to have those smaller complexes that are going to come up, and I think that that's how our town's going to build, and you're not going to really stop that. Limited development opportunities. There are limited sites in the town left to develop, right? We have, most of the development we have now is redevelopment. It's turning 2 families into condos, a small business into 6 units or 12 units or such. We have potentially the Bank of America site on Woodside, which isn't owned by the town. It's a private development, but you would assume that you're going to see some sort of units there. So, we do have limited development opportunities, and we have traffic congestion, which has been an issue since the 50s and since the 60s that I remember, and it's always going to be an issue. And sometimes you wonder how it was an issue in the 60s when everybody had maybe 1 car a family. Now everybody has 2, 3, 4, 5 cars a family, and it's just that much more of an issue. But it's always got to be something that we're cognizant of. So what does Winthrop need on the middle school side? I think we need a visionary project aimed at igniting economic growth within our town and invigorating local business while maintaining our charm and uniqueness. How will we achieve this? So what I am proposing, what I'm looking at is we're potentially building a recreational center to spark economic growth. I'll go more into that in a couple slides. And again, the vision is to find a company to go along with this project, to find a company that works in conjunction, or basically it's a public-private partnership with communities, to create a sustainable year-round athletic ecosystem to benefit users of all demographics. A company that has an expertise in assessment, design, development, programming, and an operation which allows for the incorporation of the entire community's recreational and economic desires, which will serve our community for generations to come. This partnership will enable Winthrop to maintain ownership of the land while our partner would build out the facility. And by completing the neighborhood at the top of Waldemar, I would propose that we, whatever it is, 3 or 4 2-family lots at the top of Waldemar to create a natural border between any proposed development. So that kind of finishes off the neighborhood. And between the backyards of those new houses and the potential project, we would create a greenway, so there's that direct connection from Ingleside Park to Pauline Street and via the center. So the plan would be, geez, I need better eyes now. Demolish the existing middle school site, the auditorium, and the gymnasium. Now, we've already looked into that. We're looking into funding sources for that. We have pretty much the cost what it would take. It would take approximately $1.5 million in total. It would be pretty much 3/4 of that would be the demolition of the site, and 1/4 of that is going to be, or 1/3 of that is going to be to remediate the asbestos that might be in that building. We would partner with a company who would build a facility, which would include a multi-purpose field house and a second sheet of ice. We would secure flexibility to our high school, our youth hockey programs, along with figure skating, men's and women's leagues, and public skating. We would secure space for Winthrop Parks and Recreational Program. That was a big key in this also, to make sure we would have a space that could facilitate Winthrop Parks and Rec. They've been a viable program for this town. They've been treated not as good as other town departments have over the years. They've been in multiple different sites. They've done whatever we've asked them to do, and they've done it with a smile on their face. They've gone through COVID on a time where a lot of Parks and Rec programs throughout the state have not fared as well. So they need a permanent home, and the way I envision this facility, they would have that home here. We also want to secure time as part of this for Winthrop High School to use the field house for their programs, to potentially have an indoor track, so the indoor track team could have a facility to use, and to have other, we built an incredibly beautiful middle high school, and it's a beautiful big gymnasium. I think it's 12,000 or 11,000 square feet, and the old high school had a gymnasium that was 5,000 square feet, but it's still one gymnasium. And now we have 2 schools there. So, we want to be able to have other gym space for the programs to use within the town. Secure times for residents also to use the field house year-round for fitness and recreation. And to secure space for Winthrop Police Department to continue and expand their outreach programs, along with potential space for CASA. So the field house, just to give people an idea of what we're envisioning with this field house, it's a big, expansive building, basically, that has many functions within it. It has the ability to configure itself into many different uses. It could be 4 basketball courts, 4 full-size basketball courts, 4 full tennis courts. It could be 8 volleyball courts. It could be 16 pickleball courts. It could have an indoor track. We'll have a fitness area. And potentially what I'd like to see is a Viking lounge that would oversee, that you can look at through the field house, or you could look into the rinks, and something that this public-private partnership would be able to give back to the town as a user space for us. These are just some photos that I've put in at other similar facilities. They have volleyball, and they build out locker rooms for the town. So this is a facility actually at their academy, where they entered into where a firm entered into a public-private partnership with an academic institution, actually. This is another example of how you have in tennis courts along with basketball courts in the same facility. Fitness, recreational areas. It could be a turf field in there, a smaller turf field to use for different activities. Pickleball courts. I guess it's amazing if you look around the state and around the nation at these pickleball tournaments. There's an American Pickleball organization now, and they just run tournaments continuously. And obviously a sheet of ice. Pretty self-explanatory there. So the benefits of this project, it would be a steady stream of income for our community. How the steady stream of income, and I'll talk more about it later, but it would be, we would own the property. They would build out the facility. They would have a long-term lease. They would pay us rent. The rent would be, I've looked at different facilities where the rent is around $200,000 a year. So like we just heard from Powers and Sullivan with our conservative approach, I'm estimating $150,000 a year for a rent. We would add to the appeal of our community for prospective residents and businesses. And I'll get into more why that becomes evident as we get later on in the presentation. It's an economic stimulus for business, and I'll explain that in more depth in a few minutes. And it would be a magnet for visitors from out of town and state. and no burden to the cost of our school system because we're not bringing in additional children, which we do not mind additional children in. We're not anti-children in this community. We do everything we can to provide the best educational system and programs and buildings that we can. But we're also, cognizant of the future, and we know that there's going to be incremental development going on, and we want to be cognizant of that as we're looking at this site. So how this partnership would work, the partner would provide the facility. They would generate their revenue through hosting various tournaments throughout the year, whether they be hockey tournaments, pickleball tournaments, volleyball tournaments, tennis tournaments, cornhole tournaments, whatever. And they would go to a partner. It could be an AAU basketball league, and they're going to run an AAU basketball tournament. They're going to run it in Winthrop. So that's how they receive their income from it. They've been incredibly successful doing this around the Commonwealth and around the country. The town would receive benefits as described in the previous slide. The town's going to receive the benefits, and we're going to go more into this later, but the town's benefits for this is going to be that the town would enter into a long-term lease. As part of that lease, the town will get specific, for example, for the rink, the town would get specific ice times for men's and girls hockey, as we talked about earlier. They would get specific rates for their programs. They would be able to know into the future where in 2032, the scored A's are going to have ice at this time of day or whatever. So it's very specific in a lease, which I will be putting up on a website, what a potential lease could look like. So the benefits for the town is we're going to get modern, new, built-out facilities, improved locker room space, improved recreational space and use for our town's residents as well as our youth and our whole population. The economic benefits of the town, I like to throw numbers on everything. You're looking potentially and conservatively between $30,000 and $40,000 in tax revenues from 3 or 4 two-family houses at the top of the street. You're looking between $125,000 and $150,000 in rent from the partner, and you're looking at a permanent home for Winthrop Parks and Recreation. Potential next steps would be to create an RFP and to demolish the site. So again, just to sum up, what I'm proposing is that we look at the possibility of entering into a public-private partnership with a firm, with a company that would come in and they would provide us with a state-of-the-art recreational facility that they would use to generate income for themselves through tournaments. We would use, and we would have additional space, along with all the space that we already use at the rink, for example. We would have that time and more. And we would have use of a state-of-the-art facility, a multifunctional field house facility. So that is the proposal. The next, we thank you. This PowerPoint will be on the town's website. This is not something that we're going to start, putting a shovel in the ground tomorrow. This is going to be vetted out. We're looking at all possible potential issues or questions with this. I have talked to a couple of companies, and there is an extremely high interest in this type of project in Winthrop. Our proximity to the airport, our sports history, the name of Izzioni means a lot. We sometimes take it for granted, but it means so much throughout the country. And it's something that companies are very interested in. And to be able for a couple of these companies to take a look at coming into Winthrop and giving us a proposal, I think they are chomping at the bit to do that. And I look forward to offering an RFP that will enable us to get this done. If somebody wants to look at a potential facility that you could just Google, if you looked at Boston Sports Institute, it's kind of, I would consider it the gold standard of something like this. This is a piece of property that was owned by the Archdiocese. It's on Route 9 in Wellesley. The Archdiocese sold the property to Wellesley. Wellesley partnered with a company, and the company, not only did they build a facility, a state-of-the-art facility, and that particular facility has a smaller field house. It has a pool, and it has 2 sheets of ice, and it has meeting rooms and office space and such. Part of their deal with the town of Wellesley was to spent $3 million in improvements for traffic improvements on Route 9. And it's been an incredible, they've been there for about, I want to say 6 or 7 years now. It's been an incredible success story for the town, I've talked to their youth programs, I've talked to their high school, I've talked to their DPW director. So it's, that's the gold standard of something that we're looking for. It's for them, and again, why I'm asking for conservative numbers, for them, it's a $200,000 lease payment per year. Now, that facility, if you do happen to take a look at it online, is roughly 130,000 square feet, I think, which is bigger than we would offer or want. And the rent, I'm sure, would be commensurate with that. So I thank you for your time. I'm sorry for being long-winded. I'm very excited about just the opportunity to present something, right? It's been 8 years. There's nothing that anyone in this room or outside this room could say, come up and make a presentation, and everybody in this town is going to say, wow, what a hell of an idea. That's great. Let's do it tomorrow. That's never, ever going to happen. I tried to think a little out of the box, try to create something that checks as many boxes as possible, trying to be cognizant of all the things that we're looking at and trying to provide something that will be a huge benefit for Winthrop, for its citizens, and for our future. So I thank you for that. We're going to talk about this more. It will be on future agendas. There's a public comment period coming up. If anybody from the public wants to say anything about this, I will ask any quick questions from the council. This will be on the website, and this will be on our agenda for the foreseeable future, just to take a look at and to let people digest. Councilor, yeah, what's your name again, Joe? Councilor Munson.
Quick question. You did bring up ideas so far. I didn't hear YMCA or community center.
We did, no, that, I did not put that on there, but we did
Remember you
outreach
guys
to the
did pursue it,
YMCA,
and
yes.
It didn't seem that they were interested.
They were
Is that
not
correct?
interested.
So I just
Yeah,
wanted
it
to
is
make
something,
sure.
and I thank you for saying that. It is something that we approached way back near the beginning, maybe not in the last couple of years, but we did look into it. We talked to the people from East Boston who have been very successful with theirs, and there are a lot of successful programs around. They did not have an
I
interest.
think we just would be cannibalizing their sales. We're just too close.
Potentially.
There's not enough market here is what they told
Potentially.
some people that I know.
All right, Vice President Ruggiero.
Thank you I think that's a great summation of the opportunities and the issues that we've had with this site, at least since I've been around. So I think that's really helpful for folks to hear, for us to see in, a PowerPoint presentation. Just procedurally, so where exactly do we go from here? I know the town has sold property in the past, not to this extent. We've sold like minor slips.
Yeah, this would not
of-
be selling anything.
We would not be
own
selling the property?
No. We
Okay.
would not be selling. The only thing potentially we would be selling is if we did 3 house lots.
Sure.
To finish that neighborhood off
Okay.
at the top of Waldemar. No, we would maintain ownership of the land.
And we still need an RFP for
Yes.
that? Okay. I believe an RFP committee was appointed for this site in particular back in 2021. Is the strategy to reappoint a new committee, leverage that committee, handle this internally at the manager's office? I just
Yeah, we will
want to
put a
make sure there's
committee
enough.
together. I'm going to
Yeah.
have a couple examples of Wellesley's RFP, just to give us an idea of,
Okay.
because it's something that's relatively new. It was very successful. I did talk to the town of Wellesley. They came up with 3 different RFPs before they finally settled on one. So we're going to have that as a kind of a boilerplate thing to take a look at. So I will be sharing that with the council, and again, it will be on the agenda at the next meeting. We'll set up a subcommittee to look into this stuff.
Cool.
All right, we'll move on, and then we'll get to public comment.
Can I just
I'm
make
sorry,
a
Councilor
request?
Munson.
If you're
Request.
researching and getting more data to share with the town, can you also reveal some of the lease agreements that the Wellesley has had with the private
Yep.
companies? So that way we know we would be insured of long-term access to the facility, and that we would be assured of not, with management and council changes, things changing so much that we literally have a building and an owner of a property that we can't actually
Yeah,
manipulate or
no,
change. or
and
control.
again, we're the owner of the property, and we would want to enter into a very structured lease where we are extremely well protected, and they would want to do the same thing. They are not in this, any of these companies are not in this for the short term. They've been very successful at doing this. And I think they see this as an incredible opportunity, so I think we would definitely have bids.
Some example of that would be great.
Yes, absolutely, and we could get that to you. All right, again, I apologize for being long-winded. Public hearings, we have none. Public comments. And there'll be 2 sessions of public comments. Yes, name and precinct, fellas.
Vasily Malios, Precinct 5. I'm very happy to hear that we are going to see some progress on the middle school site. A couple of things to consider, and it's probably going to come down the line at a public forum or something, but just to put it out there now, I have been to several of these locations with basketball AAU on weekends. It is packed from 8 o'clock and on, in the morning and on. They do put restaurants into these facilities, so just making sure that we restrict that so that it does benefit our center business district, as that is what we really want to focus on along with the revenue. The other piece to it is there any competitive markets like this around our town, just in case, because Winthrop is not as accessible. So, you know, if Revere puts one up, is that going to take away from us? So just a thought there. Regardless of, besides the point of the middle school site, we have Suffolk Downs that's going to be producing 18,000 new residents. Do we have an idea of what that traffic is going to look like for us? It's already kind of rough right now, so just kind of looking ahead as soon as those couple of phases are going to be finished, and we only have 2 ways in and out, and we have a ferry, so I don't know if we can kind of build a tunnel or another bridge or something, but just to put that out there, I'm a little concerned about the traffic, don't want to get stuck here.
Well, just on a couple of your points on the restaurants, no, the companies I've talked to, we do not want restaurants in there. We would be willing, for example, if the, you know, and I'm just throwing it out, if the Pro Shop wanted to put an annex in there, they would be welcome to do that. This company, the companies don't, they're not looking at revenues from within. They're looking for revenues from going to AAU camps and saying, okay, you want to run a tournament here? Okay, you pay us. That's how they're making their money. They don't want to run restaurants. They don't want to run a bar. They don't want to have any of that stuff. That's why you know, one of the facilities that I had toured had a lounge, basically. Not a lounge in terms of like a drinking lounge, just a relaxation place that they gave to the community. They gave to the facility in this particular instance, where they would have, you know, they had a trophy room up there like we basically have in the lobby. They had areas of relaxation for maybe like a Viking booster club that might want to go and watch a game from a secure place in a comfortable place. They're not into that. They just want the facilities. That's, you know, and as far as traffic, and you talk about AAU tournaments and how, you know, there's traffic, and that's a potential concern, right? Do we want 1,000 people coming in here? You look at a Winthrop High School playoff game, and you see that Walden Street is packed, and the rink is packed, and it's crazy, and that's just 2 teams playing. But again, you're having 2 teams where the home team is having their family, their siblings, their grandparents, people from the town, kids from the schools. These are kids coming from different parts of the country and stuff. You know, you might have one parent. Some of them don't have their parents there. Some of them might have siblings, some of them won't. Some of them will be local teams that would have, you know, parents going, and that's where you're gonna get the economic stimulus from, you know.
Oh, I'm cool with that, I don't have a problem with.
And as far as Revere, you
Yeah, I'm more
know,
concerned
we
about
have to be,
South
you know, I think for years and years, we've been treated as a second-class citizen around Revere and Boston and such areas, and I think we want to try to stop that. I think it's far, you know, I will say, I think a lot of the development that's being done at Suffolk Downs, they're hoping they have 2 T stations at Suffolk Downs. I think, you know, that's what they're enticing, but, you know, can you guarantee that? There is no guarantee.
Just a thought.
I know the traffic has been better since the summer tunnel was over,
Amen.
so.
And then just one other
Yes.
point. I'm going to assume that to place 2 ice rinks, you're going to need to go out as far as possible, and it may have to take the baseball field. Will the baseball field be replaced if it is taken?
I think there'd be more, you know, when we look into the
Okay,
logistics and to
just-
see how it goes, we would definitely,
Just a
you know.
thought, just a thought.
Okay. Mr. Dow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jack Dow, Precinct 1. I noticed that the first issue up here was the map. And it was the GIS map from the Assessors Department.
Yeah, that was from a while back.
So the first thing it says on the GIS map is, we make no warranties regarding the accuracy or completeness of the data on that map. So that's my issue.
Yes.
What is going to be?
And again, that is an older map.
Comment period.
Sure.
Thank you. Well, the first thing I did want to say was the green space down at the Winthrop Center is, I sat down there the other day, I was supposed to meet somebody, it's not very appealing to sit there. So if someone could take care of that green space down the center, I'd be much appreciative. But I've mentioned it before.
You have.
So,
Noted.
previous manager for the town of Winthrop at a meeting in this room stated that the first thing that should be done with this property is to get an accurate survey completed. I've asked for the survey, I'm still waiting for it. I don't think there is one. I have some research about the property at 151, which is on the corner of Pauline and Waldemar. And my research tells me it's 1.19 acres of land. The rest of the property in that area, from Lincoln Street to Walden to Pauline, is a park. It's been a park since 1902. There've been many discussions about what we could do with the land. It's a better idea to do this with the land. This is a new idea from yourself, Mr. Lettieri. But that property is a park, deeded park. If you want to change the use of that park, you have to go through a process called Article 97, disposition of land. So that the people in the town can decide if they want to put 100 micro units, or 3 townhouses, or whatever wants to be changed. It was a good idea in 1902 to make that a park for open space. In the meantime, in 2005, there was a study in documentation that it was the McGregor Open Space Plan, 2005. Then there was another one in 2014 by different people. That McGregor plan used to be on the town website, but now you cannot find it. So people that want to have open space, in a lot of communities really like open space. This doesn't seem to be, as far as you're concerned, a good idea for open space. You say there's going to be a little open space, but that's a pocket. If you want to change it to any other use, you have to go through a process. It's a 5-step process. If you went through that 5-step process, I wouldn't be debating it for 5 or 7 years. That's the law. The law is you have to go through a process to change open space and parkland to a different use. I've said it 100 times in the last 7 years. So I don't know why you don't want to go through that process. It's the law. You have to do it. If you don't want to do it, then you lose a lot of grant money. It says right in that law. If you don't do it, then you lose grant money. We don't want to lose grant money. Concerning this McGregor report, it was done by half a dozen or maybe 10 people, very prominent people in the town, to establish what the town of Winthrop has for open space and parkland. Now we can't find that report. And it's only been taken out in the last 5 or 6 months. Not there. Go look for it. It was on there for years and years, since 2005. It was on the town plans and presentations, but whatever was there, it's not there anymore. I happen to have a copy of it. I don't know if anybody else does. I'd like the town to recognize the McGregor report that says Ingleside Park has been a park since 1902, and it's approximately at this point, because they put a road in on Walden Street, which used to be part of the park, that it's 11.1 acres. So you have 1.19 acres at the top of the hill where the classroom site is that the town owns. The rest of it is parkland, according to all established history in this town. There were many, many ideas, micro units, field houses, and I don't know who's gonna establish rates for the people in the town to use a field house as part of this home.
That's part of the lease. Thank you for your comments. I will look at that report, and try to find it, and if we have it, which I'm sure we do if it was up there, it will be back up
I
there.
have it.
And I could guarantee you that we're not gonna do anything illegal. Thank you. Next. Yes.
Hi, Marcy Hamilton, Precinct 2. Hi, everybody. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. I think it would be a nice additive, but I'd like to tweak it a little bit. I think, I talked to a couple of my counselors, a couple of the counselors, and I think it would be great. I know you said you have a space for Parks and Rec. You also mentioned something about CASA having some space there.
Looking
right?
into, yes.
Right. I think that's where I was thinking of a community-based office or something where people in the town could get information, could gather, not so much a Boys and Girls Club, but an informational spot. I have a daycare, as you know, and a lot of people aren't familiar with, when they come into Winthrop, what's available to them. There's no information booth. Betsy Shane does a great job in this town as our Chamber of Commerce. So I think it would be great to have something there as well. Just for people who are coming in, you're gonna have lots of people coming in, and maybe, who knows, they might buy a house or come and have some dinner, but something, not so much as a community center like we think of it as years ago, that we used to have a bunch of community centers, but a community space for information, outreach, and help for other families in this community. That's one little tweak. And my second little tweak is, I love sports. I love all the sports, but I also love theater. And I think one big draw that's missing from this community is a space for theater, for art. We have a beautiful E.B. Newton that we have art presentations. There's a huge art community in this town. And I would love to see, I know that your company that you're talking with is basically a sporting venue.
Creation.
But I think it would draw people to have a performance space. Not like, maybe like the Playmakers had, or something like that, because I think that's what's missing down the center. People aren't seeing live entertainment. They're not, we're gonna have something next weekend, or get what weekend that Betsy's putting on the Winthrop Day. And then we're having something down at the Landing. But I think if we had a space where people could come out and perform, it would be another draw too. Just two little tweaks. Thank you.
And I will say, and again, I know Councilor Munson brought up something that I didn't have on the thoughts and ideas, but we looked into a facility similar with the auditorium to do similar with the Lynn Auditorium. And looked into the cost of that, and it was just prohibited from what we've heard, from what we've had people come in to look at that specific, I mean, we had an auditorium, so it's not like we were reinventing the wheel, but it was extreme, because that would be a supplement, it would be a stimulus for businesses, it had a lot of good selling points, but thank you. Council President, former Council President Gill.
Peter Gill.
You're always Council President.
125 Plummer Ave, Precinct 5. I just want to commend you for thinking of the neighborhood of Waldemar Ave, and you're probably tired of hearing me say it over and over again, but I think that area of Waldemar Ave should be residential, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Director Keller.
Real quick, I just want to, I think it's a great idea. I think it could certainly work. I just don't want to lose sight of the infrastructure work that still has to happen there. So if we want to move this thing forward and not have roadblocks down the line, I would keep a budget, not just thinking about a demo budget, but your infrastructure budget. We know we have phase 2 of a drainage project right behind that area, which really should get done before any more development happens. We've got rerouting of a sewer and a drain line that goes right underneath the foundation of that school. So just want to keep that on our radar so that we don't think, okay, let's build something, oh my God, we gotta do all this infrastructure work.
Thank you, and I've thought about that a lot, and that's, I think where part of the linkage would be with the developer to see what they could do. And I talked about another community where they did substantial work of infrastructure improvements and road improvements, and I think that would be something that we would be looking for too. But thank you for that.
Yes, you may. What's your name? You can stand right up where you are.
No, you can sit right
Stand
there,
where you
just
are.
say your name and precinct. Oh, name?
Tonomasu Suva. Tonomasu.
Ποιος είσαι εσύ?
Vasili.
Έλα ρε Βασίλη λοιπόν. Έλα εδώ.
Sorry.
Oh my God. That's a Greek.
Yeah.
Okay,
Το όνομά μου Χρυσούλα Βακούρος.
okay, thank you.
Kepoumenis.
Πού Winthrop?
She lives near the high school.
Yes,
43
Franklin Street.
Winthrop.
Okay.
Πες ότι έχω φασαρία που βουλώνει ο δρόμος, που γίνεται πολύ φλάκ και μπαίνει στο σπίτι μου το νερό. Πρέπει να κάνουμε
So
κάτι.
she's concerned
Flooding
that
on
her,
Franklin Street.
yeah, on Franklin Street, the water is not draining properly and it's going into her property.
Yep, and I was gonna ask the DPW about that during the town manager's report, so we'll have,
55 χρόνια εκεί.
She's been there 50-something years.
Η κόρη μου τελείωσε το πρώτο high school,
Yeah.
το παλιό.
Yeah, her daughter went to school here.
Το παλιό, πες το παλιό high school.
The old school, the old high
Yep.
school.
Το high school. Και δουλεύει μάρκετ.
Yeah, she works at in Boston.
Ο άντρας μου πες πέθανε 4 χρόνια, τώρα έχει πεθάνει.
And her husband's been gone for many years.
4 years.
4 years.
4 years. Και θέλω πες να κάνουμε κάτι, γιατί είμαι μόνη μου τώρα εκεί και το νερό μπαίνει μες στο σπίτι μου.
Okay, I gotcha. She's very concerned about the water that ends up in her home. She's there by herself, and she just wants to make you guys aware of the problem that she's seeing.
well, I'm very sorry for your loss, and you must have come as a baby 57 years ago, because you look great. And we will look into that and get you information, maybe tonight, if not tonight, very soon.
And he said, like, Betty, you said.
Δεν είμαι περίπτωση, είμαι όλπες.
No. So, all right.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Kathleen?
Hi, Kathleen Capuccio. Hi, Kathleen Capuccio, 49 Waldemar Ave. I will echo what Peter said. As a resident of Waldemar Ave, I'm thrilled at the idea of finishing off our neighborhood per se, with a couple of, whether they be townhomes or multifamilies. Obviously, two multifamily or something, not, multiple.
Not 20 units.
Just a bit to what Jack has been talking about, because I've been in meetings with Jack for quite a long time. I also think, because again, I've been to so many meetings, there has never been, at least I've asked for it years ago, but a legal opinion with regard to the title of the Ingalls parcel. I absolutely agree with Jack. I don't know if he said an ALTA, but an ALTA survey should absolutely be done. And also, I would like a legal opinion, again, I'm gonna request it again, because it has not been clear over at least, I don't know, however many years I've been coming to these meetings with regard to the couple of parcels. So that's just my thought. I'm gonna leave my thoughts on the proposal. I love sports, so I'm kind of excited about that, but want to think it through. But again, I think a legal opinion, an ALTA survey really needs to be done, because when you enter into, which I'm assuming you're thinking is a ground lease, we need to know the title first, and it has not ever been presented clearly, at least, that we know what the deed restrictions are on the Ingalls parcel. So again, just to echo a bit what Jack said, is I really think the town needs to invest in an ALTA survey.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I don't want to diminish at all what Jack says, because Jack's probably the most vocal, Mr. Dowd is probably the most vocal on this issue. And it shouldn't be laughed off or anything else. I don't think, my intention certainly, and I'm sure this council, is not to do anything improper. So we want to make sure, and I think all your comments are taken, as well as Jack's are always taken. And I know the town manager has had a site plan or is in the process of getting a site plan and all the opinions that we're gonna need. We don't wanna do anything wrong, and we would make sure we would inform the community of anything.
Yes, and again, I just want to just, if I can, just.
Yeah, sure.
And I appreciate, too, like the council, I know you don't have to respond to public comment, so I think it's nice. The fire building committee's been doing that as well, actually responding to questions, which I think is fabulous, so I want to applaud everyone that's doing that, I think that's great. But two, there's a very big difference between a site plan, a GIS survey, an ALTA survey. They are incredibly different. So that's why I'm specifically saying an ALTA, because it's a completely different set of standards. Like they're just, again, I know that just from my background, so that's just why and again, I don't think the town at all is trying to do something illegal
No,
or
I'm not
something. I would
saying-
never think that way.
Right.
It's just, also though, let's put ourselves in a good position, also though, for an RFP, to have all our ducks in a row. So that's just, was
Nope,
just all.
Totally understand. Thank you, Kathleen. Anyone on Zoom? Denise?
Yes, we have Shannon Poulos. Can you unmute, please?
Shannon, I'm sorry, can you speak up? I could barely hear, we could barely hear you.
Is that better?
There you go, thank you.
Oh, sorry about that. Shannon Poulos, precinct 3. The one thing that I don't think has been mentioned is the linkage between the issue on the table right now in relation to the proposal for the middle school site and the proposed firehouse. And I think that as it relates to the firehouse, one of the biggest issues that people in the community have is the ability to develop sites that have been unused for so long. And I think one of the things that folks are thinking about is that, we were to do the firehouse where it's currently being proposed, that not only will we have one site undeveloped like the old middle school, but now potentially 3 if you then have 2 firehouses. And so I guess just in terms from like a timeline perspective around the RFP for the old middle school and really the likelihood of being able to engage with the developer to really be able to say to people in the community prior to the ballot vote in November that, listen, because I think that there's 2 things that people wouldn't disagree with. 1, we need a new firehouse, and 2, this proposal is fantastic. I think the problem is the site. And that's the one thing I think that most people are really concerned about is why are we using this site versus another site, et cetera. And so I guess it's just how do we figure out a way to link the 2 issues and give people a sense of when the real viability of the old middle school development would be something concrete in relation to the vote in November, because I do think site matters, and I don't think anyone would argue that the presentation that you just did, President Lettieri, was amazing, and I think the process you went through to show the benefits, the pros, the cons, and the process was really, really great. And no one would argue the fact we don't need a firehouse. I think it's just how do we link those 2 and make sure that when people go to vote in November, that they know that they're, either voting no or voting yes. If they're voting no, because they don't think that there's a viable solution for the middle school, then if we could figure out a way to give them comfort that there is an actual viable solution for that, and that we could potentially, expedite an RFP or, get a developer and give comfort, I think that can really help the vote as it relates to the firehouse. So I don't mean to confuse the issues, but I actually think they're very much intertwined. And so if we could, I realize this is a back and forth, but if there's a way to, maybe be part of the FAQ process with the firehouse or part of this middle school proposal plan, try to figure out how to tie in the more strategic vision for the town and how we're thinking about these parcels of land, it could help us on both fronts. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. No, you bring up very, very good points, and it is, kind of crazy that we're doing potentially two very big projects almost simultaneously. And I think, and I think you'll hear in a short period of time, a time frame. We don't want to come off as we're rushing anything. We're not just flying by the seat of our pants. We're trying to be very cognizant of every issue, but, it just happens that timing sometimes is unique in this way, and I think you made a really good point that we do want to try to show the linkage and be very cognizant of everybody's thoughts and concerns. Denise?
Carol M., could you state your last name, please, and your precinct?
Sure, it's Carol Leach, Precinct 2. Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving me the time to speak a little bit. I only have about 37 questions, so this should be quick. I'm just kidding. I just saw there's Lateria, just so I look up. I only have one or two.
That's okay.
So the rec center idea, I think, is terrific. I'm curious about one thing, and is that, do we know of areas in the Commonwealth that have had long-term success with businesses like this, 25 years out from the start, and how have the companies kind of maintained these properties, do the towns or the cities end up having to contribute money along the way? Just curious about that, if we've looked at that yet. And then I think you already said the lease that we would offer, we would still control what kind of use, or what kind of type of place or businesses could go on that land, if we were retaining control of that.
Yes, we would maintain control of that, yes. And for your first part of your question on long-term success of these companies, this is not, I can't really go back 25 years. The facilities that I've looked at and the companies I've talked to, they've been very successful in what they're doing. A lot of what they're doing has to be similar to this, using a property that is somewhat developed. In our situation, we have a rink, and they've developed it more, or they've bought existing facilities and rehabbed them and have made them viable when they weren't actually viable. I will put a list also on the website where this link will be to give people different, there's probably 12 different facilities within 25 miles that I'll be able to share, and you could take a look at, go online. The Boston Sports Institute is just, again, it's the gold standard, to just Google that facility and to take a look at it, and you'll see a lot of what this envisioned. Most of these are done with municipalities. There have been a handful done with academic institutions where the institution really maybe didn't have a desire to put an outlay of $40 million to build a facility, so they've partnered with certain companies that they'll build the facilities and then they get the benefit. So it's kind of having a facility has its potential realized, right? You have, we have a rink here that during the season, it is used about 80% of the time, which is really good. But there are times between 7 o'clock in the morning and 2 that it's not used at all. And, then we don't use the facilities in the summer because we don't have that client base to do that. These companies have extended relationships with AAU teams and national teams and club teams where they have, people have a strong desire to run camps and to run tournaments and such, and they just don't have the facility. So I can't answer your question directly on 25 years, but all the growth I have seen has been very sustainable. But thank you. And again, ask any questions you want at a future date or call.
I will.
Or
Thank you
email.
very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have Aaron Williams. You on mute, please?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Aaron Williams from Precinct 1, and I just wanted to bring up, we are doing an effective job of communicating with everybody. Earlier, we had somebody in-house who obviously couldn't communicate with us, and about a week and a half ago, we were doing some filling and paving on my street, and I just noticed that the only cars that weren't cleared out appropriately were from my neighbors who English isn't their first language, and so are we doing everything we can to communicate effectively with all the members of our community. Just like an observation, not a criticism, because I think you guys did a great job of letting me know all of the million factors exactly what's going to happen, but it's just like, oh, no wonder their cars are still out there, you know?
No, thank you very much. That's a good thought and something I haven't thought about, but maybe we should look at looking into multi-languages when we're sending out notices.
Great, thanks, guys. I'm also for your patience, you know, to hear more about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate your comments.
Okay. Nope, that's it.
Okay. Did you have a question? Did you? Sure.
I'm Sharon Cohen from Precinct 5, and this is, I'm not used to speaking in
That's
public,
okay.
but I am concerned also about the timing and the proposal for the fire station. And this proposal seems like a very short amount of time to get this proposal to a more finalized state or a more succinct state. And I'm also concerned about the fact that you kept saying, or not you, but it has been kept saying that we can't use this site for the fire station because it keeps flooding. So if it was flooding for the fire station, if there was a problem with flooding, why would this be okay and not put a fire station there?
Okay, so I'll try to answer those questions. So the flooding, I haven't heard. I did hear, we were told probably a half a dozen years ago that one concern potentially for we've never said we can't put a public safety building there. We said it wasn't the goal of the councils previous and present where, there'd be a lack of revenue generated from. The concern wasn't really the flooding, the concern was the foundation, where a fire station would require such a strong foundation, and I'm not an engineer, but would require such a strong foundation to be able to maintain all the heavy vehicles that are put there, that there might be a concern with the foundation. And the other question with a firehouse down there, I think if it was considered, it would probably never be considered just for a firehouse because it's such an expansive location. You would probably want to do a public safety building, which would, again, it's an $80 million investment for the taxpayers, and it's no revenue stream for the town. So it's, it's something that needs to be addressed. And
We're going to have to do a public safety building at
you're
some
going to have to
point.
build. That's why we proposed what we
And the
did.
police station's going to have to be done at some time in the not too distant future, and it's been talked about sort of that they should be done at, the police station and the fire station could go in that spot.
Yep. And that's why, I don't want to get into the firehouse now, but I'm happy to talk about it at any time, but on September 26th, there'll be a public hearing that will discuss a phase 2 of the police station, where it will be, the way we designed the proposed new firehouse, it would be able to literally gel with the existing police station. There would be a walkway put in over the parking area that would connect the two buildings, creating a public safety facility, and we will show the potential plans of gutting and rehabbing the police station and adding 2 additional floors in the back, which they need for space, because there does need to be a public safety building within the near future, but we're trying to concentrate on the firehouse, being cognizant of financial times and people's, desires to pay increased taxes. A public safety building right now is probably between 75 and 80 million, and they've been going up about 10% a year, looking at other firehouses that have been built and police stations. This potential project that we're looking at is between 35 and 40 million, and, a rehab of the police station and adding floors and connecting the two would be phase 2, which we are going to present before the election to give people the opportunity to take a look at what we're looking at. Okay. Thank you all. Oh, I'm sorry.
Gillian Texera, Precinct 6. I feel like the Lower Acts, although I'm not here to speak about the trees, I'm here to speak about the streets. I'm being told that the knee-jerk reaction and speedy vote to change Locust, Cross, and Alma were due to safety issues and to make sure our residents are safe and protected, and we're being proactive and not reactive. I have heard residents speak constantly about the concerns on Pleasant Street near Court Street and Donovan Beach. I have friends that live in this area and are constantly having cars in their yard. In the span of less than a month, we've had 2 major accidents in this area. When Town Councilor Munson brought this up at our last meeting, nothing was done. How is it that major accidents have happened, people have their cars and property destroyed? Residents live in fear and won't let their children and pets play in their front yards. because of the accident that happened there all the time. Yet, there's no vote to do anything. Where is the outrage? Where is the need for the safety in this case? Once again, it becomes an equal application of the law. I see the public hearings happening for public spaces, for parking spaces. I hear residents demanding change on dangerous streets and nothing happening. Yet the residents on Locust, Almont, and Cross beg you not to change our streets, to help us with signage, to help us with enforcement. But now we are stuck living in a one-way street. We are told to give it time and that this is going to be the best course of action. But where was our traffic study before this was done? As I said, the issue on Locust Street is for the full street, not just the top by Revere. Once again, turning one portion to our street into a one-way is not going to help with the traffic issues for the rest of the street. This will not change the parking in the intersections at the Cross or at Veterans. Once again, we've asked the town to please consider more signage and more enforcement. When's the last time that you parked at an intersection or near a fire hydrant and got out and thought, wow, am I in the proper allotted spots? No. Do you carry a tape measure or the municipal codes in your car and measure to make sure you're correct? No. The center is properly marked out and it shows very clearly with signage and lines where to park and where it's legally and illegally, which further proves that signage and lines make a difference. So to quote the Lorax, unless someone like you cares an awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not.
Thank you, Gillian. I'll address a couple of those. I know I know these one-ways have been a detriment to the residents, and we're cognizant of that. It is not a knee-jerk reaction. This is one of the longest-term TSAC recommendations that we took. This is almost 4 years, I think, 3 to 4 years before the council actually took action on this, and that's maybe negative for the council that it took that long to make a decision. But we're cognizant of what TSAC recommends to us. We looked at it from any number of sources, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think we're doing it for the safety of the community. I know on many streets there are signs that say 10 feet from the corner you can't park, and a lot of it is enforcement, and then a lot of people don't want a ton of signs. And even when we discussed, you just mentioned Pleasant and Court Road, which has been an issue and an ongoing issue, and there was an issue further up Pleasant on Somerset? Sunnyside. Yeah, Sunnyside and Pleasant, that took a while again, and we were able there, because of the bend of the road, to put up a guardrail, basically, which has been very much a help, and it's taken time, but to put up signs. We do have signs coming for that area down on Court and Pleasant, but again, and I think the DPW mentioned it at a previous meeting, to put a guardrail there, we don't have that space and luxury. We could look into different alternatives, but we're not, I do understand, I live right in that area, that there has been 2 significant accidents in a short period of time. We're not cognizant of that, and we are trying to do something. It takes a little bit of time, and we have to be making sure we're doing the right thing and such. But I take your comments very seriously. I really respect the fact that you come to many meetings and you're not just coming for one issue. You talk about many issues, and I do appreciate that, Gillian, and we're trying to do the best we can with that. And I can promise you that there will be something done at Pleasant Court. Okay. Correspondence.
Mr. President, just one quick public comment. Not
If
related.
you weren't the past president, I wouldn't let you do this right now. That's not, yes.
Not related to anything that's been talked about tonight, but there's been a lot of complaints about all the paving that's been going on in town. Somewhere around 20 streets have been repaved. I want to commend DPW Director Keller, Town Manager Tony, and the council. I think it's a fantastic job, and it's off the chart. I thank you all.
Thank you. Well, that was worth hearing that comment. Denise, public comment, correspondence?
I've received none, no.
Committee reports, we have none, but I'll ask Council Flockhart to mention an upcoming meeting.
Yes, I wanted to let the people know that we're interested in the national grid issues. The meeting of the Public Safety Committee is scheduled for 9/12, Tuesday, 9/12, at 6 o'clock in room 2 upstairs, and the National Grid will be represented by Bob Coulter, so he will be coming. Bob is the manager of the person who came before. so he'll be coming to explain more. I will also tell you that they have already decided not to put up the new pole. They're working with a new plan.
The underground service.
And they're going to use one of the poles that's there already.
Thank you. School department report. Happy to report that we had a very successful school opening. Not as happy to report that we're still looking for crossing guards. Very hard to find crossing guards, and, for the safety of our children. If anyone is interested, please contact the business office for the schools. And I do want to welcome new principal at the Gorman Fort Banks, Mark McEnany. Not only welcome him to the Winthrop Public School System, but also as a new resident of Winthrop. I applaud him for moving to the town, and look forward to working with him, and he's done a great job in a short time here. So thank you and welcome to Mark. Now, it says town manager, I think it's supposed to say short, brief town manager report.
Real quickly, I met with the planning board and the ZBA in executive session. We reviewed ongoing appeals and court cases that we've got with them, with our town council. So that meeting went well. We're getting to some resolution on some of those cases. I also met with the tree committee chair, Chris Aiello, with the DPW director. We've got 25 more trees to plant this coming fall, so we're going over that list of proposed sites that they're bringing forward along with the tree warden. So we're excited about that. I just wanted to get out there. I know we've done a lot of advertising and getting it out in the public, but road work on Crest Ave began today. New time, trying to accommodate everybody, is 2 p.m. to midnight for the next 3 weeks or so to do the drainage work on Crest Ave. They're going to try to leave it as open as much as they can from that 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. time frame for some of the restaurants and businesses that are there. But again, they won't be there all night. They'll be shutting down at midnight, probably winding down around 11 and then out of there by midnight. So that's, we're not doing the overnight work there. This seemed like the best compromise for the area in order to help the local businesses and, deal with the issues that we had with the overnight work and keeping people up and the residents being upset, so.
And on that, my understanding is that's only 4 days a week, 4 10-hour days, is that correct?
Monday,
Yeah.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Monday through Thursday. And lastly, I did email out to the council, if you got it in your email, the update on the Jim Sipletter and I working on the Airbnb short-term rentals proposal changes that we got to that. Councilor Aiello had asked, to put something together. I'd like to maybe bring it up in the next council meeting and then maybe get it over to Rules and Ordinance to take a look at it. So just some suggested language change based on the research we've done of other communities, issues we're having here, and things like that. So, take a look at it. Feel free to reach out to me individually as any questions you might have on it, but hopefully to put it on an upcoming council agenda.
Thank you. And maybe through you to Steve, any updates on Titleton, Girdlestone, and now Franklin on issues that they're having with flooding?
So Girdlestone, Tilestone, we do have a construction estimate, which I discussed with the town manager. I don't know if it's something you want me to discuss now, Tony?
Well, you can give the big scary number, sure.
It's an estimate, to basically redo the drainage in today's standards and get the capacity you need. It's anywhere from a $4.5 to $5 million project to reroute the outfall and to do what's needed over there.
Not just on those two streets.
And what streets would those affect other than Tilestone?
Marshall, Tilestone, Girdlestone,
Yeah.
and Pleasant Street from Lincoln down to Girdlestone. So it's the whole neighborhood. Also actually takes water from Sunset Ave as well. So, to what you have in there now is old clay drain pipe, original drain pipe. Most of it's 8-inch diameter. You need to go to a 24 to 30-inch diameter to get the capacity that you need based on the elevation of that area, and then to reroute the outfall to be less affected by tides. That's the project that you're looking at over there to fix the problem once and for all. We do have the flapper valve. We are still waiting on that. It's still on back order. I will install that as soon as it is received. It'll help marginally in the fact that it's going to close. It's not going to let the tide water in, but again, you only have 8-inch diameter main. So heavy rains, like we've been getting this summer, are going to fill that system quickly. It's going to surcharge your catch basins, and you're going to get your ponding where you're getting your ponding now. That's just the way it is. It's not a new thing that's been happening. It's been, it's been really in our face this year because of all the rain and the high duration, high volume, short duration storms. We've gotten a lot of them this summer. And it hasn't just been there. We've seen this problem up in Sewell in the Hunt. We've seen this problem, down on, areas of Veterans Road. It goes down, once the rain stops, system does take it slowly. Again, the example I always give is take a 5-gallon bucket and pour it in your kitchen sink or your bathroom sink. It doesn't go right down the drain. It fills it up and slowly goes down, because that's all the 1.5-inch diameter pipe can handle. But we're gonna move. I got an engineering quote, which has also been discussed with Tony, and if that's something we want to move forward with, we got to fund the engineering, and then we can start looking at potential grants, SRF money, to pay for that project if that's something we want to do. Or if something, the council and the town has an appetite for. It's certainly something I want to do. My job is to fix things, but these jobs, I mean, they're not inexpensive fixes, unfortunately.
Franklin Street? Franklin Street.
That, it's not a drainage issue as much as it's a groundwater issue. That area is at sea level. We learned that with Miller Field construction. Groundwater table is 8 inches below grade. What's happening, and I forget, I'm not familiar with her name, but at 43 Franklin, I'm familiar with the situation. I've gone over there and I've inspected it with Building Commissioner Al McGee. It's stormwater management on private property. What's happening is again, the groundwater is so high, heavy rains puddle on her property, and it's not just her property, that the whole area has sump pumps. People are discharging sump pumps on private property. They're not doing anything wrong, but there's no French drains around, her home. The grade of the property between parcels, the property right behind her on Shirley Street, stormwater, just the normal stormwater flows, and not even pumping sump pumps. On heavy rains, you can see the water flowing into her backyard. They're old foundations. It's not unfortunately, it's not a public works situation. The town can't be responsible for waterproofing people's basements, for dealing with groundwater. It's not drainage pipes that are overflowing onto her property. It's groundwater and just stormwater management on private property. We've tried to explain that to her. I know there's a language barrier, and and if I was her, I'd want the problem to go away as well. But it's not going to go away without her and her neighbors doing things on their own property. And I know, she says it hasn't always been like that, and I believe that. Groundwater tables and groundwater flows, they change. They change with things like building a brand new school, a couple 100 yards away. You divert groundwater, these big foundations, all the fill that we put in over at the Miller Field. Groundwater patterns change. So it's quite possible that this has gotten worse for her, in over the past several years. But it's a groundwater issue. It's not a drainage issue.
Okay, thank you. Council Munson.
Can you guys, thank you for your thorough responses, and I'm appreciative of all the fast and quick work you guys do when you can, and for the estimate of the $4.5 million. It's a big undertaking, but obviously we have to keep looking at finding ways to make money. I would love to get an update from either of you, if it's all right, about the Pleasant Street and Court Road bend. I know it's been brought up several times, but as far as timing is concerned, and actually what you guys decided upon for solutions in terms of signage, obviously, something similar to what we've got already where the Sergeant Street is on Pleasant. But as far as the road barrier, can you explain what kind of guardrails are possible and are not and why?
It's very difficult for me to, without lining that whole area with guardrail, I can't put a section of guardrail in and say this is gonna protect every house there. There's 3 or 4 houses that have been hit by cars over there. So unless the town wants guardrail at the back of sidewalk, basically down that corridor, it's unlike Sergeant Street in Pleasant, which is a really defined curve with a curb line that's out and has a grass buffer zone behind it. We had room to put guardrail there. You're gonna be putting guardrail basically on people's front lawns. I'm happy to do it, but you gotta line that corridor. You can't just say, okay, let's put 30 feet of guardrail here and that's gonna fix it. Because depending on what angle you come from, you can miss that guardrail. So you probably need guardrail if you wanna protect those houses from Court Road almost up to Waldemar, on both sides.
And that would have to go on sidewalk or drive, or on actual people's property?
Well, it depends on, if you put it right at the back of curb, you're gonna have, you're gonna have snow issues, you're gonna have, it's gonna be under, you have plowing issues, you can't put it too close to the curb, otherwise, I suspect it will interfere with the plows as we're plowing the roads. So my preference would be at back of sidewalk. Now I don't know if, people want guardrail at the edge of their front lawn.
As far as timeline though of what you can do and what you know?
What we're doing is we've ordered signage, $7,000 worth of LED flashing signage. That'll be installed as soon as we get it. There is no plan right now. I haven't been directed at this point to line that street with guardrail. Happy to do it if that's the directive.
And last question before can guardrails withstand a direct impact from a car?
They'll slow a car down. No, at 60 miles an hour, they're going through that wooden guardrail. Yeah.
And what about, and you being the biggest expert on plowing and the effect of speed bumps, what about temporary rubber speed bumps on roads to slow people down during off-winter months? Is that a solution that you would consider?
That's a policy of the town.
But you don't mind them?
Not during the off-season? No, I don't mind them. It's a extra task to put them down and take them up. It's not something you just drop in the road. They gotta be pinned and secured and so it's another task.
Any other questions? Council, Vice President Ruggiero.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on a public comment we heard over Zoom, and I know it was a little bit difficult to hear, but what I gathered was that there was paving on a street, and the only car that wasn't moved during the time that there needed to be paving was the car of a neighbor who maybe wasn't fluent in English. And I was on FinCom this past year, as you guys know, and there was a lot of conversation during FinCom about, and it was really great discussion. It was discussion advocacy, and trying to generate some financial backing for the ELL students in their public school systems. There's been an influx of ELL students, and there are a variety of different measures that the public school system needs to take in order to properly service these students. And just hearing the public comment and thinking back to those meetings and those discussions, I mean, these ELL students most likely come from, limited English proficiency households. And so I think that is something that maybe we overlooked or didn't look at. And, I know that they're mandated to work on it on the school side, but on the town side, these kids are coming from a Winthrop household, so it's just obvious that, there are neighbors and constituents and taxpayers that require these services as well. And, at least in my precinct over the past week or so, 2 major mailings or letter drops went out from the DPW office. At least 2. One was regarding the night work on Crest Ave, which thank you, by the way, for hearing the concerns of the neighborhood and being amenable to that, and kind of with the schedule, that's a little bit better than working all night long, but also being open to the residents, but, to the businesses, excuse me, but, that was one sort of, multi-paragraph letter, and then another one that went out was in regards to the street direction change that, we heard public comment about as well, again, another multi-paragraph full letter. And to me, if you don't understand those, it's a public safety issue. I mean, if you don't really comprehend what's happening and what the letter says. So, I think that's something that we got to be cognizant of. I don't know what the census data says, but I know we have school data, but school data is only for students. If you don't have a student going to school, we don't know what the household data is. But I guess I just, echo what the constituent mentioned and ask the manager's office to kind of look into, what other languages we can kind of get these messages out, especially the ones regarding, major public safety issues and changes like that. I would imagine, the interaction trying to get that person to move their car wasn't necessarily a positive one. Maybe it involved the police, maybe it involved someone from the town, and, that's not really the best introduction to, like, the town or the police department is when it's, hey, move your car, I don't know, but, I feel like we can do that a little bit better. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
There are many ML, I think ML now is the proper verbiage, so multilingual
Yeah.
instead of yellow, but a lot of ML students, and I don't know if there's a privacy issue or not for the schools to share information with the town, that we might be cognizant of that and maybe reach out to families to see if there's a preference of languages. So I'm going to go to Councilor Belcher, had her hand up first, and then.
Thank you. Just to touch on a couple of things that Director Calla mentioned, there are a few other areas that you talked about similar to the Tileston Girlstone situation. Would it make sense to look at them more collectively? I know the $4.5 million is a huge price tag already, but things just get more expensive over time. So are there any of those areas you think we should also consider while we're looking at this project?
Yeah, there's improvements, drainage improvements. I could spend $100 million on drainage improvements. You got over there, the X is a major problem. Areas of Shirley Street. Like I said, the Upper Highlands and the High and Sewell areas. There are these heavy rains, these 1.5 to 2-inch rainstorms in the course of 1 or 2 hours. It's, anything, this drainage system most of the drainage system in this town is over 100 years old. It's old clay. It's way under capacity, but they're a lot of it's misaligned joints. These old clay pipes just slide into each other. They didn't have, they didn't podge them together. They're not cemented together. Dirt and debris gets in, so they're, not only are they way under capacity, but as much as we try to maintain them, there's still roots in them. There's still dirt in them. There's still issues, Unfortunately, the drainage funding wasn't as readily available through the years as MWRA gave money for water and sewer. Drainage is eligible under Chapter 90, but we only get $280,000 of Chapter 90 money each year, and that goes to streets and sidewalks typically. So the drainage component is expensive. It's very much needed. We're a coastal community, but that's.
Maybe this is something we can think about, like we have a street and sidewalk plan going out a few years. This is maybe something we should also think about in that type of way. And then just another thing on the flashing signs and guardrails and things. Any street improvement in town is a positive for everybody. But just to advocate a little bit for my precinct, I haven't seen any street improvements down there in a while. So just while we're thinking about this and budgeting for things like that, I would like to consider.
I don't know where you live, Council.
Shirley Street. Sorry, precinct 3. So just to think about other parts of town that maybe not everybody drives on every day, but still have speed and safety issues.
Thank you. Councilor Flockhart.
I was just thinking with regard to Councilor Ruggiero's mention of the multilingual people, perhaps we have a resource there in these children that are coming in to the middle school and high school that speak these other languages that could do our translations for us if we set up some kind of school program, like an internship or, credit for college or whatever they do with the kids that get these credits. I know my granddaughter did, to do this kind of translation that we would need for these other households.
It's the situation now. We've had a lot of multilingual families coming in where, a lot of the kids are elementary school kids and they don't speak a lick of English. And it's been very difficult, and it's, Vice President Ruggiero brought up a great point, and it's something that, we think about it so much on the school side, we don't think about it as much on the family side. Anyone else? And just to get back to Director Callow, I know, and he said this for years, that, what do we have, 45 miles of infrastructure?
46 miles of water main.
46 miles of water main.
35 miles of sewer main.
And we've been incredibly aggressive, I think, over the past 6 to 10 years in addressing a lot of these needs, and people have noticed it, obviously, in traffic and congestion and rerouting and such. But we've looked at, what, 7, 8, 9 miles?
We're just about 10 miles.
About 10 miles,
Of
yeah.
water main.
Of water main, right. But, and the director has said for years that, 70% of our pipes are, well, it used to be 85 years or older, now it's close to 100 years or older. Yep. I think Mr. Gill was here when some of those pipes. It's keeping you up there.
So you don't want me to come back to any more meetings?
I want you at every meeting. It's a pleasure always to have you here.
I do want to follow up on the Civil War with you when you get a chance.
School Department, Town Manager, the CDICR is meeting, will be meeting September 13th, so we will have a report at our next meeting. There is no old business. New business, Town Council vote. So, there's a motion that the Town Council vote that the Millerfield ticket booth be named in honor of Amy Gallagher, or take any other action relative thereto. This did come from the Memorials Committee. It has a positive recommendation. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. And on that vein, this Friday night, September 8th, at 5 p.m., we will be naming the Amy Gallagher ticket booth, and there will be a dedication at Millerfield. We invite people, as a school committee and the council invites people to come down. Before the game, Winthrop will be playing Stoneham. The game's at 6:30, but the celebration is at 5, and I couldn't think of a better person to have that facility named after. So thank you for the council for passing that motion. Appointments, there are 2 appointments. Town Council accept the appointment made by Town Council President Lettieri to appoint Jonathan DeMoro as member of the Firehouse Building Committee, or take any other action relative thereto. Jonathan is replacing a previous member. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Welcome, Jonathan. Another appointment, Town Council accepts the appointment made by Town Council President Lettieri to appoint Susan Tremasi to the Historical Commission, or take any other action relative thereto. This appointment has come to me from the Historical Commission, and they spoke very highly of her. Reading her resume, she is incredibly well versed in this and will be a great asset to the commission. Any discussion on the appointment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Town Council vote to appoint an outside auditor. Well, we just had the outside auditors here with us today. I would like to put this on the next agenda and have us vote on that, and possibly look at and maybe talk about, do we go out to bid on this? Do we look at other, it's a very selective group of people. The field is small, but I just think it's something that we need to take a deeper dive on and just not automatically reappoint somebody. Powers and Sullivan has been fantastic to us. I would like to see reports maybe in a more timely manner, but they're very thorough. They've done a great job for us, but we want to be able to see things right away, So this will be on the agenda for the next meeting for us to potentially take a vote on. Town discussed ballot question on firehouse building. And this should be expanded too, because there was also rules, the ORC, Ordinance Review Committee, which came back. So I think 35, 45 days before?
35 days before the
35
election.
days before November 7th,
Yep.
we have to have this
October
information
3rd.
in. So that would give us the next meeting, which is why I put it on new business now, so it will be on old business at the next meeting, which will be the 19th. So we will be voting on the ballot questions. We'll be voting to put a debt exclusion on. We're not creating the ballot question for debt exclusion. The state will create that for us. We will be creating ballot questions for the ORC recommendations. If we waited until the first meeting in October, I think it's October 3rd, which technically is 7 weeks from November 7th, so 7 times, or 5 weeks, so 5 times 7 would be 35, but I'd like to be able to get this done at the next meeting. Town council vote to transfer $49,000 from group insurance town line to a special article to pay replacement on stairs on public way connecting Herman Street to Walden Street. So this is, as we discussed in the past, this is going to be sent to finance. We've talked about public ways and such and at length, and we're trying to prioritize. This just came to fruition where the bus line moved from Herman Street to Walden Street. There's a set of stairs that have been there for probably close to 85 odd years or more. A set of granite stairs that have been there, they're not in great shape. They don't have adequate railings, and it goes from Herman Street down to Short Street, actually, and then on to Walden. But this is something that we talked about when we changed the bus route, and we said that this was something we addressed. We got a few bids on it. This was the low bidder. So this will be sent to finance. Public comment. I'm sorry?
Is there a town manager's report?
He gave one.
Obviously, sorry.
Yes, that's okay. We'll look here for public comment.
Thank you very much. Jack Dot, Precinct 1. I did find, like I said, the open space plan. And I just want to quote on the second page. Well, let me go back to page 2. Town of Winthrop Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee, Bob McNeil, Sean Driscoll, Richard Honan, Scott McGovern, Larry Holmes, Karen Wynn, Sadillo, Paul Rupp, and Virginia Wilder. And the consultant team was McGregor and Associates. So this was a paid-for plan. It just didn't come from an individual or somebody thinking about changing things. We have to respect people and the decisions that come before us. This is a 120-year-old park dedicated, I believe, in perpetuity to be a park. When Virginia Wilder did that park, Riverside Park over about 20 years ago with a grant, a state grant, that was designed as a passive park where you could go for a walk without getting hit by a baseball, hockey puck, tennis ball, pickleball, or any other type of thrown or launched object. It was designed with a grant to be a passive park. And so, going back in history, it wasn't always a passive park, but that's what they got the grant for, to be a passive park. So then other people have better ideas than what Virginia Wilder proposed to the town and got the grant money for, a passive park where you could take a walk. Now there's a baseball field and a hockey field, and a skateboard park, etc. So, people take advantage of these situations because they think they have a better idea. I think the best idea for this property, and I go back to when I was a tree warden and I got the information about the expansion of Logan Airport. They gave the town $2.5 million for a greenery program. Well, we didn't spend $1 on a tree back in the year 2000. Instead, they built a DPW building, which was much needed, but they could have planted half of those trees anyway. So The reason why I want open space is because the Centerfield taxiway emits pollution in a large scale. And if you took a walk down there from one side of town to the other, you'd feel it. I've done it. We need as many trees as possible between the airport and the town of Winthrop. That's why I like the idea of open space. Trees keep us healthy. They catch the carbon monoxide and they produce oxygen for all the people in Winthrop to enjoy, to stay healthy. That's my issue. It's not just because I don't live there. I'm a developer. I work on buildings all over the town. Been doing it for 40 years. If there wasn't development, I wouldn't have a job. But I think it's very important to respect people that come before you. 120 years ago, it was dedicated as open space and parkway, documented by 2 plans in 2005 and 2014. Someone has a different idea. They want to put a ballpark on a passive park that was built for a passive park. So you can take a walk the dog. So, I hope people recognize the fact that we're being inundated with pollution from Logan Airport. I don't think air conditioning is a great idea to be able to breathe good, clean air. We're lucky that we have an ocean beside us. It cleans the air for us. Many airports are surrounded by valleys, and there's a lot of sickness. I've studied it for years. For 25 years, I've studied airports and pollution. So I want everybody to consider to plant as many trees. That's why I'm on the tree committee or the winter whatever the case may be. And I'll continue to do that. As many trees as possible in this town. There's plenty of places to plant good trees that will thrive. We don't want to be planting trees in marshland or floodland. We gotta pick our spots to plant good trees. There's much room once you take down those schools along Pauline Street, the street that you live on, Lincoln Street, Walden Street. Myself and Dick Dines planted all those Thorn Sunny locusts on Walden Street 40 years ago. And it's a beautiful shade tree, and they're good for that environment. That's a marshy environment. Maple trees, oak trees are not supposed to be planted in marshland. So you have to really pick and choose your spots for trees. I think there's about 40 trees on Walden Street. In this beautiful shade, you pull up to the park and you can sit under a tree. I think that's the key to this whole situation. Trees are the key to this whole situation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jack. Yes, Ms. Swope.
Hi, Suzanne Swope, Precinct 4. I just want to echo what you just said.
Thank you.
Because trees are really important, and I fight this every day when I live in Sioux Harbor. You would think they would love trees, some don't. My second point is that I thought there was a pretty obnoxious sign in front of Viking Pub. And I don't care what political persuasion you are from, if we can do anything to keep signs like that out of Winthrop, I think it would be a good idea. I don't know if we can do anything about it.
Suzanne, what sign?
Yep.
It's F blank blank K blank.
Okay.
So, I don't want my grandchildren to see it. I don't care if it was for or against Trump or for or against Biden. It's just not appropriate.
Great. Agreed. Totally agree. Thank you.
Take a look at that tomorrow. Sorry about that.
We will take a look at that. Karen?
Karen Chavez, Precinct 2. I'm wondering if the town manager could get a copy of that management letter, maybe on the website.
Yep, we have that. Yep, absolutely.
And also, as far as those stairs are concerned, from Herman down to Walden, I think they're a lot more than 80 years old. They were a direct access at one time to the narrow gauge.
The narrow gauge.
And the narrow gauge hasn't run since 1940. So, God only knows
Way
how
before
long this
that.
It's January 1940.
is. Right.
Thank you, Karen. Any other?
Just one last
Director
thing, just in
Caller.
case people are watching, I don't want to think that I'm forgetting neighborhoods, but to better answer Councilor Belcher's question, Pico Ave is another area, Morton Street neighborhood, as well as Ingleside Park.
Thank you.
I know, I get residents calling a lot, so I don't want them to think, hey, you didn't mention that. So there's a lot of issues out there with drainage.
Thank you.
All right, public relations, we'll start with, there is committee members still needed. Please contact the town clerk for information. Anyone who has pulled papers for the November 7th election must have those papers in and certified by November 19th.
They have to be in by September 19th.
They have to be in by September.
Yep, 19th.
Have to be certified by September 19th.
We have to receive them by the 19th, they have to be certified by the 24th.
Also, September is Recovery Month. Winthrop Public Health and Clinical Services is hosting a community event. We would love for you to join us on Thursday, September 28th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. The event is to highlight recovery and provide educational resources to the community. We will begin at Town Hall, where we will have a candlelight procession to honor those who we have lost to addiction. We will also walk from Town Hall past the police station, fire department on Pauline Street, and we'll end up at French Square. There will be a few people speaking at French Square. Food and refreshments will be served, and for more details, head over to winthropclear.com. Councilor Honan?
Nothing.
Councilor Fusillo?
Nothing.
Councilor Munson?
Thank you.
Councilor Belcher?
Nothing.
Councilor DeMarco?
I'll only keep you guys about a half hour or so. I'm kidding.
Councilor Flockhart?
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I'm not.
Really quick, I'm gonna breeze through this. For the last 48 hours up until this morning, I have been really frustrated with the work going on Revere Street and all the detours and everything. But I wanted to just, I took a kind of a step back, and, it's like these people are working their tails off. Like, if you see them, they're constantly working. If you have an opportunity to give them a bottle of water, if you have an opportunity to buy, I bought them pizza the other day when they were working on my sidewalk, do it. All right, do it. Just give a little kindness back. Everybody is frustrated with all the work. We all hate it. We all hate trying to get out of the town. It's madness. But give a little kindness back, because these people are really working hard. So I wanted to say that. And I do have my frustrations. I'll discuss it offline. But yeah, so that's it. Just realize these people are working really hard. And that's all I got right now.
Thank you. Councilor Flockhart?
To piggyback on what Councilor DeMarco said, you drive through there, you see progress every week. So they are moving along, and it is getting better.
Vice President Ruggiero?
Yeah, Friday, September 8th at 5 o'clock. I think this might overlap with the dedication, but it's the Open Rec Kickoff hosted by CASA, the Winthrop Police, and the Winthrop Elks Club. Again, this is funded by the Shannon Grant, so we thank our state legislators for thinking of us and the folks involved in providing that grant. For folks that don't know, these open rec nights are on Friday nights. It's for Winthrop middle schoolers. I think it's focused towards 6th to 8th grade. It gives kids something to do, on Friday nights when school gets out, and it's, monitored by trusted adults, the folks at CASA and the Winthrop Police. It's a great opportunity for the kids to, create positive relationships with the police department. Usually, your first interaction with the police department is not a positive one. This provides the youth an opportunity to have a positive first interaction with our police. At 5 o'clock, there's a cookout at Larson Rink, and then the open rec night starts at 6. So, 6th to 8th graders in Winthrop, see you there. Yeah.
All right. Councilor Munson, one thing?
Thank you. I apologize, but I did want to remind people that there is a country night, Big Ed Country Night, which is a fundraiser for a cancer support group. They help out cancer patients, cancer families that are dealing with costs, and it's at biged.org, BIGED.org. So it's on October 7th, and it's in honor of my past best friend who fell to esophageal cancer. So look it up if you're interested in some line dance and some good food from Blackstrap Barbecue. Again, biged.org. Thank you.
And I will say on next Monday, the 11th?
September 11th.
Next Monday, September 11th, at the high school auditorium at 6 o'clock will be the first public forum for the firehouse, for the new firehouse. I encourage people to attend. There are pamphlets now available if people would like. They're going to be around the town. We will also have a website up and running by the end of this week. The website will be winthrop.firestation.com. That will have a copy of the pamphlet on it. We'll have interviews. It will have videos of tours of the firehouse. It will have pictures of other community firehouses. It will have answer your finance questions. It will give a link to get contacts for the committee members. It will have a space for comments. As long as you're putting your name and address down there, you will be able to leave a comment. So again, we encourage you again, just to understand the facts, understand the progress, look at what we're proposing. And again, so the first public forum will be September 11th at 6 o'clock. And at the second public forum on September 26th, we will be presenting phase 2 of this project to give people an idea of what we're looking at in the future.
Is it on Zoom?
It will not be on Zoom from the high school. It will be videoed from CAT. It will be live on CAT, I believe, and it will be replayed on CAT, and it will be on YouTube the next day, CAT YouTube. Anybody else? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Munson, second by Councilor DeMarco. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No, meeting adjourned.